Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about Broken Arrow and how ridiculously broken this game is in such a way that people are able to get a clear advantage by exploiting the game, or not even exploiting the game. If someone disconnects and reconnects, their team will end up having an advantage because of that disconnect. It doesn't matter if they're doing it deliberately. It doesn't matter if they're trying to exploit the game or if their computer is just struggling at that specific point, like network connection, stability, etc. You will have the same issue in that scenario. Regardless of the reason why someone might disconnect and then reconnect, you may end up having the same outcome. So here's what's going on. I have to give credit to Hippie for his video on the subject, for bringing attention to this, and also the various people that have commented on this, because it is a lot worse than even Hippie brought up in his video. So by default, the trickle of points that you have is 300. That's assuming you have no units. If you bring units, so for instance, I'm bringing the Sentinel over there, the number of points is going to be reduced in this case to 290. So I'm going from 300 to 290. Now, if you're in a 5v5 game and one player leaves, so you end up 4v5, those 4 people are going to get an extra trickle of points of 75 to make up for the person they've lost. Okay, all well and good. There's plenty of issues with losing a person in your team, and it is a problem that a lot of people are quitting, they're leaving, there's no ELO penalty, but it's far worse than just dealing with that problem. It's even worse than dealing with people that are using third-party software in order to cheat. Because if you have a person that disconnects from your team, you end up 4v5, you get those 75 extra points for the 4 people that stay in. If that person reconnects, what ends up happening? Well, the team already got those points, that point trickle that should have gone to him, right? But if a person reconnects, and this is what people have found out, if you reconnect, the game is going to give you all of the points that you would have missed out on. So basically, anyone disconnecting and reconnecting for whatever reason is giving their team an advantage, because that team is gaining 75 points, so that team is gaining 300 points basically spread around 4 people, and then that person who's reconnecting is double dipping. So that's 600 points that a team may gain extra, dependent on how fast someone disconnects and reconnects. It may not be as much, but it is increasing the point trickle to basically 300 for the people still in, and the person reconnecting is gaining 300 as well. That is very bad, and that in itself is an exploit. And people are deliberately using this exploit in order to gain an advantage in their multiplayer matches. I thought it was pretty bad, but then I started noticing in some games that people disconnect and come back, and the enemy team seemed to have some advantage I couldn't really place my finger on. So I kind of saw this happening. I even saw it happening in my own teams. Now, I'm not willing to do this in a multiplayer match. I have only quit games. I haven't gotten a single disconnect or crash myself. And I've only quit games when everyone else quit. That's it. Like, my drop rate is like 1%. But here's where it gets even worse. It's actually over 600 points there. If you leave a game and then reconnect to that game, you're not just gaining those 300 points, you're also gaining those 75 points that went to each individual player extra because you left in the first place. So a team that's losing a person, they're ending up at roughly a 700 point advantage. Roughly, give or take. A 700 point advantage compared to a team that doesn't have someone disconnecting. That is already game breaking enough. And that's game breaking even if you don't have people abusing systems in the game for a deliberate advantage. So even if it's just happening naturally, it's already screwing over the balance, it's already screwing over matches by itself. We're always going to have stability issues in video games. You can't really fix that, but the problem is in Broken Arrow, people don't get penalized for it, for just leaving matches and not coming back. But what's ridiculous is that if they do come back, their team might actually have an advantage because they disconnected and came back. So people with crapping computers might end up hurting their team, but might also end up benefiting their team, even if they don't know about it. But what's even far worse than one team gaining hundreds of points extra that they shouldn't have, really 375 if you want to split nails, right? But depending on how people are handling it, you can give your team a temporary points advantage, then gets those points themselves, and ends up really like a 700 point advantage for your team. But what's even worse, far worse, and people have apparently known this one from the beta. If you call in units on the battlefield, right? So let's say, I call in a C-17, I call in a bunch of units. What ends up happening when you call in units on the battlefield is that you start a cooldown once those units are destroyed, or once those units are returning to base. So if I call in an F-35, or I call in all of my F-35s right here, as an example, and then I return them to base, all of them, all 3 F-35As that I have in my deck, you can see that it started a cooldown the moment I returned them to base. That cooldown is longer if a unit is damaged, that cooldown is longer if it's destroyed, it's longer if you've used up ammunition, but you always have some level of cooldown when you call a unit and you either return it to base or it gets destroyed. Or if it gets damaged and then you call it back to base. That does happen. So when you're calling in supply helicopter, you're starting cooldown. When you're calling in jets, when you're calling in tanks, supply trucks, it doesn't matter what kind of unit we're talking about. It always does occur in that. But if you disconnect and then reconnect, those cooldowns are reset. And that is not a joke. And people have found this out. Like, I really wish I could show this in a match, but I'm not willing to do this deliberately. I think that's just a really, really scummy move to do something like that in a deliberate way in a match just to gain an advantage. But people are doing it, and they are gaining an advantage, because think of it from this perspective. If you call in a unit, you start the cooldown, you lose that, or you call in a unit, you lose that unit, but then you can reset the cooldown of that unit, and you're gaining extra points. You have an inherent advantage. Now, you can't call in more units than what you have in your deck. So I can't just have more than 2 sentinels on the field, right? That's not going to work. But I can call in 2 sentinels for recon purposes, lose those sentinels, which can happen a lot in matches, then disconnect, reconnect, and I can call those 2 sentinels again instantly the moment I reconnect. So the only cooldown is how long it takes me to reconnect to a match, basically. Or realistically, since you've actually reset the cooldown, since you've basically reset your deck when you reconnect, you could just call them in, disconnect, have them on the field, they don't die, someone gains control of your units, you reconnect. You can't get more than what you have in your deck, but you can lose the 2 that you already have, or whatever units you have, and then call in 2 more instantly, despite the fact that you just lost your units. That is so broken, is so ridiculous, and people are using this deliberately. They're using it in high elo matches, they're using it in low elo matches. Any kind of game that has a pre-made may have this kind of behavior. And again, it's even worse than just people cheating with it, because it's people disconnecting for whatever reason. Whatever, just computer issues, network issues, game stability issues. Personally, I haven't had those. The drop rate, like my personal drop rate, I've never gotten disconnect, but it can happen for plenty of people. So it is an inherent issue with the way the game is designed at the moment, the way the game is balanced. It is completely breaking multiplayer. And it's breaking multiplayer in such a way that soon enough there might not be a game to talk about, or there might not be a multiplayer community to talk about with regards to Broken Arrow. Now, if we look at the leaderboards for some of the best players in the world, what we see with Ben over here, for instance, he has a 0% drop rate. Okay, we look at Tay, 2%, we look at others, 2%, 1%, fair enough, right? But then you start seeing people with like 4, 5%, and you really start wondering, it's like, okay, did they just disconnect there? Could be reasonable in hundreds of matches, getting a 5% drop rate. Okay, fair enough, reasonable enough. And I'm not sure if the game is counting you disconnecting and reconnecting as being part of that, because it's not something that I've personally done, disconnecting and reconnecting, to tell you. Like, the only drop rate I personally have over here is because of games I literally quit and didn't come back to because everyone else had quit. Those are the only circumstances. But then you see someone with a 12% drop rate. Now, I'm not saying this person is doing this deliberately, because maybe they just don't have the best connection, maybe they don't have the most reliable connection, maybe their computer is struggling. But when you see someone top 30, and again, I don't know if it's counting you disconnecting or reconnecting as part of that. Could be either way. Please let me know what it actually is. But when you see people like 12% drop rate, world top 30, he was actually 11 earlier today, you start wondering, are these people struggling with their computers, or are these people doing this deliberately? Again, not against any specific person. I think you need to validate that on a case-by-case basis. Hippie did show a game where he clearly showed that an enemy team was doing it deliberately, but you got to go case by case. And this is kind of the problem. How do you prove someone is doing this deliberately, right? And again, I don't know if the drop rate counts you disconnecting and reconnecting, because again, I just haven't done that. But if it is, and I'm assuming it is, could be a very wrong assumption, then it can be reasonable enough to say if I have 5%, but once you're going over 10%, I'm really going to start questioning whether you're doing that legitimately. Like, I think there's plenty of people that do need to start explaining themselves. Oh, look, just someone with 10%, right? Like, most of these people, if you look at this list, right, like, you start seeing people with, like, fairly high drop rates, like 10%. It's not too crazy, but then you see a lot of people with like 1, 2, 5%. That's reasonable enough, I think. But people at 0%, quite a few, 1, 2%, like these are the best players in the world in the game. And more often than not, you see low enough drop rates. But then you start seeing things above 6%, 5%, over 5%, 6%. You start questioning. It's like, okay, who's cheating? Who's exploiting, who's breaking the game on purpose, and who's just having computer issues? And we don't know. And apparently the developers knew this was an issue. They knew that people could apparently gain extra points by disconnecting and reconnecting. They knew that reconnecting could reset your unit counters, your unit timers. And they knew this before the game came out. They knew it from the closed beta. They did not fix this. And that might just very well kill the game. Of everything else, having an issue like this, as I've stated, it's not just going to happen if people deliberately doing it. It's going to happen by just having people disconnecting and then coming back. And it's going to completely... And it's already destroying the balance in multiplayer matches. I've seen it happen in some of my games. I was wondering what was going on. I couldn't explain how I would go into a match... Someone on my team or the enemy team would lose a bunch of units, and then they just get those units back instantly. It's like, how do you have the points? Have you just been sitting on a bunch of points? I couldn't explain it. I really couldn't explain it. Well, there's your explanation. This was happening. Whether or not they were cheating, doing it deliberately, or they were just taking advantage because their game had crashed, I couldn't tell you. But it is happening, it is a problem, and the developers need to fix it. Otherwise, it's going to be a ghost town very shortly. Costin signing out.